Everyone thinks the 2008 financial crisis was the first time bankers nearly toppled a nation. They are wrong. Paris 1716, France was bankrupt. The War of Spanish Succession had drained the royal treasury completely. The state owed debts it could never repay. Into this catastrophe walked John Law, a Scottish gambler and mathematician with a radical idea: print money, back it with colonial land, and watch the nation's economy soar. The French regent, Philippe d'Orléans, was desperate enough to listen. Law wasn't a fraud in the classical sense. He had genuine credentials. He'd studied banking systems across Europe. He'd written a book outlining his monetary theories. The regent made him controller of finances in 1720. Law possessed legitimacy, authority, and the ear of power. That's what made what came next so dangerous. Law's scheme centered on the Compagnie des Indes, the Company of the Indies. He claimed it would extract wealth from French Louisiana, a vast territory in North America. Investors could buy shares. The company would mine gold, harvest furs, establish trade monopolies. Wealth would flow back to France. Shareholders would become rich. The state would become solvent. It was perfectly logical on paper. Here's where the standard history stops. Most accounts present Law as a con man who knowingly inflated worthless shares. The reality was more complex. Law genuinely believed in his system. He'd seen similar models work in other nations. He wasn't stealing, he was experimenting with capital itself. But belief and mathematics aren't the same thing. The shares began to climb, not modestly, violently. In 1719, a single share cost 500 livres. By September 1720, the price hit 10,000 livres. Investors who'd bought early were seeing 20-fold returns. The wealthy rushed in. The middle class liquidated estates to buy in. Servants borrowed against their wages. Everyone wanted a piece of the Indies. Law's bank printed money to fund the purchases. Paper notes circulated freely. The French economy expanded at an unprecedented rate. For a moment, it worked. Inflation stayed low, trade increased. The state's debts shrank. Law became the most powerful man in France after the regent himself. He was made a noble. His mansion became the center of Parisian society. But the Indies weren't producing wealth. They were producing reports. Law's agents in Louisiana sent back glowing accounts of the territory's potential: gold deposits, fertile land, unlimited resources. None of it existed at scale. Louisiana was swampy, disease-ridden, and sparsely populated. The company couldn't generate the returns it had promised. The shares were decoupled from reality. Insiders knew. Law's associates began selling quietly. They cashed out at the peak. Small investors, who'd heard the pitch from a friend or a broker, held on. They believed the narrative. They believed in Law. They believed in France's future. By late 1720, the selling pressure became visible. Share prices began to slip. Panic followed. Shareholders rushed to convert their paper notes back into specie, actual gold and silver. Law's bank couldn't meet the demand. There wasn't enough metal in the vaults. He issued more paper to cover withdrawals. Inflation spiked. The currency lost credibility. By December 1720, the system had collapsed entirely. The losses were staggering. A contemporary estimate put the total destruction at nearly 2 billion livres, roughly equivalent to the entire annual revenue of France. Families lost fortunes. Small investors lost everything. Widows lost their inheritances. Servants who'd borrowed were ruined. Suicides spiked. The social fabric of Paris tore. Law fled France in 1720. He went first to Brussels, then to Venice, where he died in obscurity in 1729. The regent's reputation never recovered. Confidence in French finance was shattered for decades. The monarchy's authority took a hit from which it wouldn't fully recover. Historians would point to the Mississippi bubble as a precursor to the French Revolution itself. But here's what changed the narrative. Law wasn't a liar. He was a believer in a system that outran reality. He genuinely thought the Indies would deliver. He genuinely thought paper money could solve France's crisis. He was wrong, catastrophically, irreversibly wrong, but he wasn't knowingly defrauding anyone. He was a true believer in an impossible mathematics. That distinction matters. The Mississippi bubble wasn't caused by a single villain. It was caused by structural incentives. Desperate governments will embrace unproven theories. Investors will chase returns without questioning sources. Insiders will sell before the crash. Systems will detach from reality when everyone's benefiting. Law was brilliant and delusional. The system was broken. The real lesson isn't about one man's fraud. It's about how quickly consensus can form around a false premise, how authority can legitimize the illegitimate, how paper can substitute for substance when enough people agree it should. The Mississippi bubble happened in the 18th century. The mechanisms it exposed remain perfectly intact today. Law's ghost haunts every financial crisis since. Tulip mania, the dot-com collapse, subprime mortgages, cryptocurrency booms, all of them follow the same pattern. A plausible narrative, early returns, insider selling, mass panic, collapse. The names change, the structure remains. What makes the Mississippi bubble essential to understand is that it happened when markets were new, when regulations didn't exist, when the state itself was the primary investor. In that moment of maximum vulnerability, a system collapsed that had seemed unshakable. The same conditions exist now, just in different forms. Law died believing his theories were sound. The mathematics were correct. The timing was wrong. The reality was insufficient. He was a man undone by the gap between what he understood and what actually existed. That gap is where every financial catastrophe lives. Subscribe next week. We're breaking down the architect of the 2008 collapse and what he's still getting wrong.